apart from Capture Collider, a mesh. Let's move that spinning thing there and remove. That's very done. Cool. So we're not going to touch this too much in regards to. I think that's more as a tech demo, so to speak. Okay. So the first thing we need to do is we go to Blueprints, and actually no, we're not going to Blueprints. Under here, we're just going to click New Folder, and we're just going to create a new folder called A. AI. And then in here, we're going to create a blueprint class. And we want this character to move around and have animations associated with it. So we want to choose the character type. Okay. So we're going to choose character, and I'm just going to call this NPC. Okay. We're going to open up our NPC. And then you can see here, there's nothing here apart from Capture Collider, a mesh, and character movement. We want to select the mesh component, and then on the right side, we're just going to select what mesh we want to use. And we're going to go for the default mannequin or the female mannequin, and then on the right side, we're just going to. And then you can see here, there's nothing here apart from Capture Collider, a mesh, and character movement. We want to select the mesh component, and then on the right side, we're just going to select what mesh we want to use. And we're going to go for the default mannequin or the female mannequin. I select the female mannequin for this one. And what we want to do is we want to move it down, making sure that the bottom of the capsule sort of lines up with their feet, which by the looks of things it is. Cool. And then once we're here, so you see this blue arrow here, this takes our forward direction. So what we need to do is ensure that our character is rotated in the direction of the forward movement. So here I'm just using the shortcut keys W, E, and R. So W is default to direction movement, E to change to one thing. We need to apply an animation class for this mannequin. And for this, we're going to default to, where is it? Third person animation BP. Okay, so we're going to default to that, and that will be fine. So we're going to hit compile and hit save. I'm going to close that. And next thing we're going to need a few more things to help get this all set up. So we need an NPC. The next thing we're going to need is another blueprint. And we would normally use a player controller in order to control the actual player itself. However, that's only specific to our player controller. So what we need to do is actually we need to search more types of blueprints. There's only a select few. And what we want to search for is AI. So in the all class box down here, search AI, and we'll search for our AI control. And I'm going to call this NPC AI. Okay. We need a couple more things as well. So under artificial intelligence, if we right click in this panel, artificial intelligence, now we need a behavior tree and a blackboard. Now behavior tree enables us to give directions to our NPC, and it will follow a series of set behaviors, essentially. So we're going to call this NPC underscore and then BT for behavior tree, and then we need to create a blackboard to go with this. So I'm going to call this NPC underscore BB for blackboard. Okay, and now we've got our four components all set up. Now, you probably know what the Blackboard does, and the Blackboard basically allows communication is happening with the meeting. We need to go to our behavior tree. So we need to set up one more thing. So if we double click on our NPC, we need to go to viewport, click NPC self. On the right hand side, it will ask for a AI controller class. We want to change this to our viewport, click NPC self. One more thing. So if we double click on our NPC, we need to go to viewport, click NPC self. On the right hand side, it will ask for a AI controller class. We want to change this to our NPC AI. Okay, so it knows that we are using because that's the piece of AI that we're going to be using. Okay? That's all we need to do. We actually don't need to touch this character anymore. So we can compile, save, and we're just going to leave this character alive for the time being. Next thing we're going to do is go to our NPC AI, double click this. We don't need to write anything inside here, apart from going over to the event graph, and we're going to remove event tick because we don't need that. And from event begin play, we're just going to drag from this, and we just want to type run behavior tree. Okay, and then so basically we're saying on begin play we want to run a behavior tree, and then if you go to BT asset, we want to select our NPC behavior tree. We click that, compile, and save. So what we have now is we have our NPC AI hooked up with the behavior tree. We click that, compile, and save. So what we have now is we have our NPC AI hooked up with our behavior tree, and our AI is now hooked up to our actual NPC itself. So all things should now be communicating with one another. Next thing we are going to look at is our behavior tree. So if we double click our behavior tree, and you'll see that this is straight away looks very, very different. Now we don't want to touch the root at all. We'll leave this as is because this is the initiator. So this kicks off our behaviors, if that makes sense. So what we're going to do with our root is we're going to highlight over this little box here, and we drag off this, and then we want to select or make a selector. Now what a selector will do is it will select between different roots within the behavior tree. Now, what I mean by this, if I was to drag off of here, and if I was to create a sequence, and another sequence, now what this will do, the selector will, it will select whether to run this or to run this. Now, by default, in a behavior tree, everything will run down the left-hand side. So you can see here's little numbers. So you've got 1 and 2, highlight here, highlight there, you see 0. And what this basically says is that the selector will run whatever is in the sequence first. If the sequence fails to fire, it will then jump up, and then it will look at what's in the second sequence. If that fails, it will then jump back to the selector, and it will ping back across to sequence 1 again. Okay, so it has a to and fro behavior. If you think of it like that. So if sequence 1 can't fire, it'll then jump back to select and it'll fire whatever is in sequence 2. Okay. So we've got this more or less set up where we want it to. Okay. Now we're not going to worry about what's going on in sequence 2 for the time being. We will jump into this in another video, but we want to focus on making our first sequence to begin with. Okay. Now I'm going to hit save, and I'm going to close this down. And whilst we're here, our AI or NPC first up is going to need to be displayed in the world, obviously. So we're going to drag our NPC and drop them into the world. Okay. I'm going to leave our NPC, just move over here. Okay, so just out of the way from the player character. Now our NPC needs to be able to move within a specified area, and the way which we do this is that we need to basically call a nav mesh. So in the top left hand side here, we're searching for classes. We're going to type in nav mesh, and we want to drag in nav mesh bounds volume. So we click and drag this, it will give us a cube to use within our sim. Now, this cube will dictate the area of which any NPCs can move around. So we want to make this cube a little bit to begin with. So if I select the enlarge tool or scale tool, and if I scale this up, and I want to make sure, if I zoom up so we can see the area which we're encompassing, and if I just scale that right up, in fact, I want to, right, if I now hit P on the keyboard, it will now give us it will highlight areas where our NPC can move around. Now, some of these areas we can tidy up, obviously there's a large gap around this box, and there are some elements here, but we can tidy that up later. All right. For the most part, Unreal is quite it's quite clever with how it calculates movement and the space where essentially the player can, or the AI can move to. So obviously I want to really encompass the whole level. So if I click here again to turn it off, and then I'm just going to enlarge it a little bit further. If I do that, and just make it a little bit higher. No, that's true. That nev mesh which we just specified. However, if we drag from here, there's no. It gives access to these tasks. So we've got finish the result, make noise, move directly towards, move to. But we need to specify that we are moving to a random location. Okay, and there's a little way that we need to do before we get to this part. Okay, but we will be using that function and the wait function shortly. Okay, so in order to do this, we're going to need to create a new task. So in the top right corner here, or left hand corner, you'll see the option for new task. If you click that, it will give us a blank task which we can create. Now, a task is a series of instructions which dictate what is going to happen when everything is sort of compiled and filed together. Now, what we're going to need to do to kick this off, if we right click and search begin AI. Just going to find what was it looking for. Okay, bear with me. Okay, it should be event execute AI. Okay, now from this we want to drag off from our control pawn and we want to git player git character. Okay, no, that's not playing again. Right, let's try again. Okay, so with the event receive execute AI, we also need to be able to end the task as well, and we do this with a finish execute. So if we right click and type finish execute, and what that basically ensures it happens is that all tasks will start and end. Okay, and we need to make sure that this is successful. So what we'll do it later on is we need to tick that to ensure that this task was successful. And it's important that all tasks run in this fashion, because otherwise it will start and it will just continue to run. So it's important to have the finish execute option here as well. So from here we need to git our active location, not player location, and then we need to drag off from this, and we need to git a random point in navigable radius. That's a mouthful. Okay. Now what this will enable us to do is it will choose a random point within our nav mesh. Okay. And the control point is basically the origin point. So it will start from our origin point. In this case, it will be our actor, and it will choose a random location from that actor within the nav mesh. So what we're going to set this to begin with is that if we set the radius, we set that to about 1,000. So it'll give us something there to work with, and it'll give us a relatively wide area that our AI can then look for specific points to move to. Okay. So before we go any further, we're going to need to essentially join up the dots here. Okay. Because what we're looking for is a random location, but it needs to be stored within a variable, and this variable is going to come from our Blackboard in this instance, because it needs to communicate between different elements. So what we're going to do is if we go back to our behavior tree, and if I go to actually, you need to make sure it's actually, if you click behavior tree, just as a heads up, folks, you need to make sure that your Blackboard asset is set to the correct Blackboard. It should set this up by default, and it should just default it to the first Blackboard asset which is present within your game. Just make sure that is in place, because what you'll do is if you click Blackboard, it will then show this screen here. Okay, this is your Blackboard where you can store different make sure that is in place, because what you'll do is if you click Blackboard, it will then show this screen here. Okay, this is your Blackboard where you can store different variables and different pieces of data. Now all we need to do at this point is select new key, and then we are going to choose a vector, and I'm going to call this set location. Okay, so we're looking for a specific set location, and it's going to store that as a vector. Now we need to save this because it should then display information here on the right side, and it just makes sure that it's all components there are working. And we don't really touch any more for this. Okay, so we're going to head back. So from this, we just click back to our behavior tree, and then what we should find is that set location should also be present down here as well. Okay, so it's communicating from our Blackboard, and it's being moved across into our behavior tree. Okay, so next thing to do, if we go back to our task here, the next thing we need to do is set up a variable, and we can communicate with what we have in the Blackboard. Okay, so we're going to click new variable, and I'm just going to set this as a if we just call this vector. And in fact, I've done so I'll set this up wrong. So under vector, we will need to set this as a Blackboard key selector. Okay, and basically what this does is it essentially allows it to hold data that's held within a Blackboard component. So here we've got one variable which is being shared across different areas within Unreal. So with this, we want to make sure that this is set to public before we do anything else, and we're going to drag this into our scene, and we're going to get that done. Then from this, we're going to drag up, and we're going to say set Blackboard value as vector. Okay, so we are setting this up so that it's taking the value stored within our Blackboard essentially. So let's move that up a bit, just to make sure everything's nicely tied up. So random location, we're going to plug that into Blackboard vector, and then drag that across there and drag. That into there. Okay. We then hit compile. And save. And that should more or less be everything. So yeah, we have our AI, it's running through, it's grabbing the location of our actor, it's returning a origin point, and we're saying that from here we have a 1,000 degree radius, and then from that we want to choose a random location within that radius. That random location is being stored in a vector, which is communicating with our Blackboard component, and we are storing in the vector, and then once that is then finished, it's then finishing the execution. Okay. So once we're at this point, okay, so compile, save, we're going to go back to our blueprint, and actually before we do anything else, let me just close all this, because one thing that always happens is, so we've got a funny name here for our task that we just created. I'll right click this, click rename, and we're going to call this find random location. Okay, that's spelled that wrong. Oh no, it is. It's fine, it's just not showing that. Okay, so find random location. Cool. So get back to our blueprint, our page tree, sorry, and then from this sequence here, we're going to drag up and we're going to say find random location, and this will find a random location, and we want to make sure that the vector set here is set to set location which we've just created. Okay, so it's going to run this. It's going to ensure that we move to that location, and then once we've done that, oh no, sorry. Okay, so it's going to run this. It's going to ensure that we move to that location, and then once we've done that, oh no, sorry, it's going to move to the location. It's going to find that location. Then once it's found that location, we then want to call up the move to function here, and then again we want to make sure that this is set to the location that we're setting it to. And finally, we're going to call a wait function to set to the location that we're setting it to. And finally, we're going to call a wait function, and we're going to ask this to wait for 2 seconds. Okay, so essentially what's happening here, so from the root of our behavior tree, it's moved down to our selector, and the selector will always default to running on the left-hand side first, so it will always choose node 1. So it's going to follow down to node 1, and from here, so the difference between a selector and a sequence is the selector will choose one or the other. The sequence will run through every single branch that runs off of it before then it then finishes. So the sequence will always run in this format. So it will sequence this node here first, then this, then this. Okay, it will then come up, and so long as it can still fire, it will go again. Okay, so it won't jump back over to this until no, sorry, it'll jump back to here, and if there's nothing in here, then it'll continue as that essentially. Okay, so it'll run in that order. So it'll run node 1 first, node 2, node 3, node 4, jump up, nothing node 5, so it'll come back to here, node 2, node 3, node 4, etc. Okay, so once we've got this, we can then hit save, and we close it down, and then fingers crossed, if we now hit play, we go around our MPC. No, okay, right. So what have I done wrong? Okay, I've done wrong. So what I basically did, when I create this, I forgot to click the success tick box. So that thing that I told you to make sure that you do, I forgot to do that. So yeah, my bad. So all you need to do is tick that, hit save, or compile save, close this down, and then when we hit play, you now notice that our NPC is moving around. And essentially what this means is, if I get a good viewpoint from up here, so this NPC is literally using the nav mesh to find a random location. It then finds that location, and then it is then moving to